footprints, and they can't be replaced very easily. But anyway, we got those terms. We'll talk about them. The dynasties, successful dynasties. And obviously, there were some smaller ones unsuccessful. The Myra and the Gupta dynasties were the most successful. The Myra dynasty itself, the first, created in the Ganges River. Remember the Ganges River on your map. You put it on. It drains into the Indian Ocean on the east side of India. The Indus River is on the west side of India. I would assume that the Ganges River probably has its source in the Himalayan mountains, which expand itself all the way across the northern tier of India and kind of keep it as that subcontinent. All right, that with the Hindu Kush mountains on the western side. But this created the Ganges River Valley. Obviously, they dwelled on the genetic plain, those geographical areas, and created by Shangupta Myra, who was the founder of the Myra dynasty. It was well-organized government and bureaucracy. The term bureaucracy means that he had people underneath him that he probably appointed. Maybe they were elected. More so, I bet you they were appointed, I would venture to guess. And they built roads. Now, more times than not, successful periods of time is when those dynasties built roads, right, for number one, to get their armies to and from places. Number two, to get their trade goods to and from places. And number three, for communication factors. So there were a lot of factors that dwelled on the road building. It was awfully important for some of these successful dynasties. Roman empires noted for their road building, and obviously they needed to have roads. And then they had trade. I'll get to the steps. They had trade, which obviously dwells in wealth. Everybody wanted that trade. India's along the coastline, has a lot of coastline area where other places around Africa or the Chinese or the Persian Gulf, as far as the Middle East was concerned, we're going to trade with them. But obviously they collected taxes. The government needed money. More times than not, the taxes were collected from the poor side of their population, which I've never understood how they can tax people that don't have a whole lot more than they can tax the people that do have a whole lot. It's kind of like never taxing millionaires, but always taxing the people that make $50,000.
I mean,
right?
not even close to that.
Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now your question, I hope it fits.
How did they pave roads?
Well, I didn't say they paved roads. They made roads.
How did they make the roads?
Well, they had a lot of hand labor, something manual labor, something that we kind of shy away from, but it was handmade. All right. I would assume that they still had carts. All right, two-wheel carts. That they had beast of burden. That they just shaped roads and brought dirt from the sides and build them up. I would assume. Maybe they put rock on them. I'm not even sure on that. But everything was done by hand and by manual labor, and obviously what they're doing is clearing the way. If it was a path through a lowland area, maybe they build it up. If it was a path through a hilly area, maybe they cut into the hill. You know, you can dig and dig and dig and get through things, or maybe they had to build a bridge across a stream or a creek. All right, those types of things, just so that it's easier to haul things. Then obviously they had their problems, I'm sure, just like we have today, where roads are washed out in times of flood, and what they're going to have to do is probably go in and rebuild those roads again, much like we have to when we have high water years and roads and whatnot are washed out because of rushing water. All right. Now, Shangupta Myra obviously wasn't going to live forever, and I already talked about dynasties in the Myra dynasty, and in succession a family member. Well, his family member that was going to take up after him was Osaka. All right, he was the most honored. All right, grandson of Shangupta was the most honored. He experienced a long, bloody war. Now he's kind of in that mode of Siddhartha Gautama, where for whatever reason, all right, the suffering of war, affected him. Now we know that Siddhartha Gautama, the story is that he went out on his own once he experienced suffering after 29 years of never seeing it. Went out on his own to try to experience or find a place where there was no suffering. He realized there was no such place. That suffering existed in all places, wherever he went. This guy happened to experience the effects of war, right? The bloody aspects of war, and I would assume that there was somebody that was probably chipping away at their dynasty, and the people that supported his family and his dynasty obviously had to chip in, and he saw that firsthand. Maybe he had experienced it by being in the war himself. All right, war changes people. We know that. Vietnam War. Many have grandparents that experienced the Vietnam War. I just read a story here, North Dakota story, I guess you could say, or I should say Montana, where a couple of brothers, I was in my Western Ag Report, a couple of brothers was on the front page where they tried to save the Nakoma horse, which is a native horse of the plains, a native horse. And his brother died, but he's carrying on the legacy because of their thought process that horses couldn't talk, that they needed a voice for them. Yeah, question.
Okay, so why was this guy so famous
Which guy?
that you were just talking about?
Osaka or Shangupta Myra?
Shangupta Myra.
Well, because he was strong enough to unite them, I would venture to guess, strong enough to get people to build roads. You know, you become a leader by setting, number one, an example, but getting people to follow you. That's the key to being a leader, is getting people to follow you. If you don't have people following you, you're probably not going to be a leader. That people are probably shunning you in that regard. But to be a leader, you got people, number one, to listen to you, and number two, to follow your ideas. And obviously, he did a pretty good job of that. And obviously, his son was going to do a pretty good job of converting people to his line of thought of, suffering needed to end or violence needed to end. He was going to convert to Buddhism. Top official was going to convert to Buddhism, which obviously is a religion that stressed nonviolence, much like Hinduism did as well, but Buddhism especially rejected the violence. All right, rejected the violence. All right, and he promoted and paved the way for the spread of Buddhism throughout Asia. Now, we know that Buddhism is not going to continue to exist, that it was going to be absorbed by Hinduism, but his promotion of Buddhism was going to allow Buddhism to grow in other places of the world and thrive in other places of the world. It just didn't thrive very well in India after him and his promoting it through his government at the time, but it certainly was smart on his part to send out missionaries to get people converted to Buddhism, much like the Roman Catholics tried to spread Christianity in America by sending missionaries over to convert the Native Americans
It
or
was
whatever.
very wrong, very wise.
Huh?
Very wise.
Wise? Now, the French did one of the same. They brought their people over in the St. Lawrence River Valley, and they tried to promote people to religion in terms of their missionaries as well.
So
But
very
he
wise.
promoted and paved the way for the spread of Buddhism throughout Asia. Brought peace and prosperity, which obviously leads to good times. People aren't suffering during that period of time. You can kind of equate to that they're going to kind of like the thought process. Sometimes when you're a leader, it's a question of, sometimes it depends on the time you're leading. We take a look at Abraham Lincoln. Was he a great president? Well, we look at him as a great president because he endured the Civil War. Would be listed as a great president if we lost the Civil War? Probably not. But he was assassinated. He made some pretty good decisions at the end of the Civil War to get Ulysses S. Grant as a commander-in-chief, a person who was going to take the war to the South and end it. But realistically, he was criticized before the Civil War with all the bloodshed that had went on during it. He was criticized heavily for that. Now, again, he eventually was labeled the greatest president in American history. Osaka here, you take a look at, was labeled pretty good by people because peace was abound at the time and prosperity. India really prospered during his time, and he helped unite the diverse groups of people within his empire. Now, we talked about Aryan invasions, we had Dravidians, and X number of others that were going to come on, and he united those groups of people together. Now, again, that goes back to David. All right, he united the 12 tribes of the Hebrews in that regard. Even though they had been one group, one people, they had kind of drifted apart. And I've got to believe that India, when before the Shangupta dynasty or the Myra dynasty, is that they were probably different in some respects. And people had to unite them, and obviously prosperity and trade between the groups was going to happen, and obviously that's a big factor. Now, Osaka's death. Osaka's death. All right, meant that the Myra dynasty is going to crumble. There's always that one, I should say always, sometimes there's always that one leader that really doesn't maybe groom somebody after him. And that's the case a lot of times in history, is that some leaders just didn't groom it. They thought that they probably took it for granted that somebody's going to fill in after them. And obviously, you don't think you're ever going to die in that regard. And things aren't going to run any differently after you, but realistically, there are just some people, like I said, that carry or walk, and then when they walk or they leave big footprints. It's tough to step into those footprints after somebody leaves. Okay, so Asana's death brought decline to the Maya dynasty. Small kingdoms divided. It's like the breakup. It's kind of like dropping a jigsaw puzzle on the ground, and everything goes in time. 500 different pieces. Now, I don't know if they had 500 different tribes, but small kingdoms, plurally, they divided or developed. So nobody really united them together until the next dynasty that we're going to talk about, which will be the Gupta, and that's going to be, about 500 years after the Maya. There was a big time frame, 5 centuries we're going to go between, and everybody maybe scrambled for power, or just those small kingdoms thrived a little bit. I would assume that there's probably some competition amongst those small kingdoms in regard. One of those that became successful through trade is the Tamils. Now, they said you came to the southernmost part of India. Were they on the island of Sri Lanka? Maybe. Southern tip, I'm not sure. But anyway, they developed trade, and obviously they developed trade because they're along the coastline. They traded with the early Romans. The Romans came down the Persians because they had taken care of and conquered the Tigris and Euphrates River, or the Fertile Crescent, or the area of Sumer, the old civilization of Sumer. They had conquered that far eastward. And the Chinese later on were going to trade along the coastline of India, because they'd come through the Indonesian islands, and they'd come and they'd get India, and there were trade goods. The Chinese obviously had products that people coveted. Obviously, America was one of the same, or Europe. Now, this is 500 years later. Like I said, there wasn't anybody that really solidified India until the Gupta dynasty came about. This dynasty enjoyed a golden age. So they obviously brought things together like the Maya dynasty, but they had some things that they were going to be noted for as well. Like under this dynasty, the India had a looser government with power left in the hands of the individual villages and city government. I look at this as kind of more of a democratic government. All right, plain and simple. A democratic government, that they give more people a chance to govern themselves than they did anything else. More chance to govern themselves. I hope you're not playing games back there, Dave. I hope that's not the case.
Why?
I hope that's not the case.
Just a live stream class.
But anyway, we got under this dynasty, India enjoyed the golden age. And that golden age mentioned that, or label it as just simply a looser government.
It's for me to go back and edit the whole class.
And villages and cities and governments, all right, left in the hands. More people have a chance to do a little bit. Obviously, that's going to be good, I guess you could say. Now, under his dynasty, the arts and learning grew. So obviously, people had time, all right, to do those things. They had people that were probably feeding them, or they had a reliable food supply. If we didn't have grocery stores, I'm going to have to go out and produce food myself. And obviously, they didn't have that opportunity. Now,
You still do that anyways.
Building things or mowing yards, and I'm trying to produce food myself, and I have to can and raise a garden and maybe have a cow or two. It's just not going to happen. I'm not going to paint art or paint pictures or sculpt things or anything like that. We know that the Romans are going to do in their empire, and obviously the Indian people are going to have their cultural heritage by those things developing at that time. But learning grew as well, and you're going to see that they're going to have religious schools that are going to educate people. Now, we have 2 avenues ourselves. We have public schools and we have private schools that we can educate ourselves, or we could be homeschooled. I guess there's 3 avenues in that regard. But the students educated in religious schools, so they put an emphasis on religion as well. Now, the Gupta dynasty devised the Arabic number system that we use today. So they're ahead. What they were doing or dealing with is they were shaping up what we have. And then they developed a decimal system numbers based on 10. Our number system is based on 10. Vaccinated for smallpox 1,000 years before the Europeans, and I got European spelled wrong there, used it. 1,000 years his father dominated. More times than not, societies were male dominated, and it's no different than the Indian societies. Sons live with their parents. These guys in here, which are, I guess, prevalent, you're in the majority here, and I would be living with my parents. Obviously, I don't live with my parents, thank God. I think I would, it would be all right.
It'd be what?
It'd be that couldn't happen. All right, but sons live with their parents and daughters went to live with their husband's family, which that was their tradition. Is it going to be a great situation? I suppose sometimes that it wasn't. Families perform the essential function of training children in the tradition and duties of their caste. And parents, and this is the big thing, is that parents had to arrange marriages for the children. Your mom and dad, guys, are going to arrange who you're going to marry. It doesn't matter if you're madly in love with somebody or googly-eyed over somebody. You'd be fortunate, all right, to marry them. And what they did was they paid your family. You guys, that bride's family was going to pay the bridegroom family. Maybe it was 5 cows, or maybe it was a piece of land. All right, whatever they wanted to get themselves into that family, that's what they were going to try to do. All right, and hopefully they were going to take, I suppose, that bride. Take our daughter off our hands. We'll give you this. And a lot of times they wanted to increase their family's prestige by marrying one of theirs into a different family or whatever. Wasn't marrying for love, that's for doggone sure. And many times they financed the costly wedding festivities. Maybe that concept of dowry and the bride paying for the wedding is carried over. Nowadays, it seems like they both sides kind of split the cost, so to speak. Not always, but more times than not. All right, and we're going to stop right there. That's where I ended this morning. The test on one fact, just like before, you can figure out your grade by dividing the top by the bottom equal. That's not too difficult. That's simple math. You should know that by now anyway. I would think that.
Your son slept in history class.
Hey, Brad, when are we getting the test?
You weren't perfect either. You're not perfect either there, buddy.
I am perfect.
Take it to put on my
Did you know?
Brad, when are we getting the test?
What? What'd you get?
2.
How'd you do?
What'd you get?
Dedicated.
Unless I got 2. What'd you get wrong? You got number 8.
No.
I got number 16, so I didn't do
What
it.
is that around?
Number 8. What? Same.
Hey, buddy, I heard
For 8, I put Hindu. It's Buddhist. No. Hey, Brack, you got this all wrong there, brother.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah, would you put for number 8 on the matching, like the Buddhist and
Thank you, Mr.
Hindu and both?
Bradbury.
Number 8,
Oh,
third
Brian.
page.
Louis, you got on
Did you get it wrong or
Everybody
right?
put Hindu? Number 8.
Did you get it? Yeah,
Both.
8. What'd you get?
Both.
Number 8?
What?
Number 8's both.
What?
Is it?
I'm gonna kill myself now.
Well, I had it right.
We did everybody. So why did I get
Go on past.
2 and 2. Yeah, there's not fucking 106 questions.
Yeah, I
Okay.
couldn't find this one, so I put
Both
those.
rejected.
I'm,
Okay. No, what is
Bradbury, right?
What is it? How come I got a half on? I didn't know that one.
What's
Wait,
going on?
what's-
One right there.
You said 4.
Yeah, they did.
Where's that? You got them all.
But you.
I didn't
I know you did on the map.
I didn't need it.
I know, but you did good though. I didn't know. I didn't do the map.
what? 32 out of 34.